Well, the guy who has been the man who's allowed them to move that ball around and has been knocking down shots, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the real surprise X factor that at times has been able to give this team offense when they need it has been Jayson Tatum. I think it's time we ask the question, though, based on recent events and recent performances. Has Jayson Tatum hit the rookie wall? Because I think he was shooting around 35, 36% in the last several games. I'm not saying that's horrible, but even the number of attempts he got against the Pelicans was really, really low in terms of shot attempts. And we don't see him going to the rim the way that he was. I'm sure some people will say that the defenses of the opponents have sort of figured out how to game plan against that, but I'm calling hogwash. Would like to see Horford a little bit more involved in the offense, and I think that's where that ball movement really should begin. The way it started at the earlier in the year was Horford was a big time playmaker, and I don't think we see the offense running through him. He's setting that high screen for Kyrie, but the pick and roll is not as smooth as it was. And Tatum was the beneficiary of a lot of that. Now, also, as you and I talked about preparing for this, he had that dislocated pinky. And since then, he hasn't been able to really knock down that outside jumper. His 3-point percentage fallen off quite dramatically, although I'd say it's understandable. How come we don't see him generating as much offense right around the rim as we did? Some of that shake and bake that he has to set up his ability to drive is missing. And we can tag that on to Jaylen Brown a little bit later because they kind of work in tandem. Every time we have a conversation about one, we've got to talk about the other, it seems. But as far as Tatum, do you think he's hitting a rookie wall? Are you going to just chalk it all up to the pinky finger? Or do you just think that opponents have schemed against him to try to limit his impact?
It's a good question. I think the pinky finger is, you have to look at that as a potential um, source of some of this at least. So he injured the finger on the 21st. It's only been exactly a month since then. So before that point, he had 2 good months of NBA basketball where he's shooting about 50% from three. Since it hurts the finger, it's about 35%. Could it be defenses are challenging him better or respecting his shot more, paying more attention to him on the 3-point line? Perhaps. But let me go to some other numbers here. So since the first of the year, so they've had 6 games in that time. Not a great span. I marked, I'll say so. But in that time, in those 6 games, Tatum has only gone to the free throw line. This is hard to believe. 10 times. 10 times. He had 10 free throws this month so far. So now, and before that, he had 6 attempts against Brooklyn. He went to the line 11 times in that great comeback against the Rockets a couple days after Christmas. Charlotte, he had 6 times. Washington, 6 times. So he's not getting the line. He's not being aggressive in either taking the ball to the rack and getting to the line. And his 3-point shot has, kind of struggled. Now, if you take out an 0 for 4 that he shot against Minnesota about a week and a half ago, the percentage gets a lot better. But having said that, you've had, those are the kind of peaks and valleys you see of shooting and why you kind of balance these things out over a long spell. So I think that there is some rookie wall situations. I think that may be why we saw the Celtics sign Jarrell Eddy, a shooter, to maybe be something of a guy they can throw in there if they need shooting, and Tatum isn't getting it done. And today against the Magic, he puts up almost 37 minutes. So it doesn't seem like Brad is taking minutes away from him. It seems like he's still getting a great sum of minutes, but the production isn't there, and it's just he's not getting the line, he's not getting the shots he needs. And particularly, I think to me, and I don't know about how you feel, but a game against like Philly, you don't have Kyrie in the game. That's the opportunity where we need to feed him the ball. We need to get him opportunities. He only got 11 shots against Philly. He only got 4 shots. He only got 6 shots against
In a game without
Pelicans.
Kyrie,
We
that's the
can't
other
do
thing.
that.
There was plenty of shots to go around for
Right.
Jayson. And so do you think that's an aggressiveness issue? I mean, you mentioned Jarrell Eddy, and I don't want to dive into that too much, except to say that I thought Jared Weiss explained that perfectly. They've got some guys on two-way contracts that can only use 45 games each, and they're trying to save them for down the stretch and headed up towards the playoffs. So they can sign Jarrell Eddy to 2 10-day contracts leading up to the trade deadline and then really take stock of where they're at that point. So I thought Jared really laid that out perfectly. And I think that is the reasoning for it. But they do want shooters. They want guys who can space the floor so he fits well. But do you think that Jayson just lost some of his aggressiveness? I mean, is that what you think you're seeing? Because when you talk about shots being able to go around in that Philly game, like I said, I didn't get to see it because of the blackout. It takes 3 days. And with all the other sporting events this weekend, I didn't get a chance to catch up before the show. Do you think that's aggressiveness? Do you think that's where the concern is?
Well, Mike Gorman mentioned it in the Magic game, and the thing that he said was, it seems like it takes a while for Jayson to get going in the game. Now, I think that speaks to a general motivational factor. I don't think that, and he's not saying that over the last couple of weeks. I think he's saying generally over the course of his early NBA career, it seems like it's about motivation. It's about saying ready to play makes it
But
sound like
isn't
he's
that
not ready to play. But I think
isn't that
that's
the rookie wall? Isn't that
no,
exactly it?
no,
Like
no, no,
when
no.
no
I
no
don't.
no, just listen, hold on, just let me so just that general always having to be on, right? So he's making all of his shots early on, it takes him a little while to get going, et cetera, et cetera. But when that is the case, and then all of a sudden the shots aren't falling, it makes it even harder. And so the minute you face that adversity, or maybe the shot isn't falling because of an injury, or maybe it's because of conditioning, or maybe it's because of so many games at such a crazy pace, isn't that, I mean, the rookie wall, I don't necessarily think is just more games than in college basketball, or just the fact that you get fatigued from all this increased travel, and the schedule and the routine is more rigorous or different, or more playing time. I think some of it's mental too. I mean, the rookie wall can probably present itself based on the individual player for multitudes of different reasons. And I think maybe in this case, the pinky threw him off. So he lost a little bit of confidence. And I think his rookie wall may be a lot more mental than it is physical.
I think, yeah, no, I think that's right. And how many times has he had, or how many opportunities has he actually had to kind of assess his place in this league? I mean, he really has not had that opportunity to kind of say,
Just had a
okay,
lot
let's
of
sit back
nights
and
off to
watch.
let that set in, right? You
Well,
just had
yeah,
a ton of nights. I mean, that was
yeah,
a
but you're
lot
not
of.
sitting watching. I mean, Jalen sat back and watched a lot. I mean, we talked a lot about why he's not playing enough, why he's not out there. I mean, Jayson has had, apart from the Philly game at Philly, where it became obviously things got crazy there, and the Pelicans game, he hasn't played under 30 minutes. And the last time he played under 30 minutes was against Utah, middle of December. I mean, they're feeding him more minutes, 37, almost 37 minutes against Philly. They're giving him the opportunities, but at least in terms of shots, it's not kind of coming through. And the other point to that is, accepting today's game, okay, of the last 7 games, he's had, in terms of plus minus, 5 of those 7 have been minus, on the minus side. So he's not on successful units. 5 out of the 7 last, again, plus minus has its own kind of problems
Limitations. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
but
limited.
it's a measure that things are not going as well with him on the floor as it had been. And so, and that's yet another reason where you're right. Maybe it is, he has hit the wall, but in a mental aspect, not necessarily physically being too demanding. And I think that's probably what you'd want to see, right? You'd want to see a guy who physically maybe isn't there, mentally hasn't quite figured it out, but has
At
way
his
left to
age,
go to get there mentally, and I think that's okay.
yeah, at his age, you'd much rather have the mental stuff of his adjustment to the game versus the physical stuff that you saw with like a Jared Sullinger, right? I
Yep.
mean, that's
Yep.
that's really what you're saying, but
Right.
he's far more promising in that regard, because obviously there's a mental adjustment for every player, and he could snap out of it just as easily. So I have another theory on what might be going on with the team. So we'll hit that right after this. But first,